I'm trembling with fury right now. The HOA just slapped me with a $2 million lawsuit because I tore down their illegal $300,000 mansion that sat on my property without consent. Lauren Clark is bawling in designer heels, standing in the rubble of her own crime, screaming that I'm the criminal. She stole my land and thinks I should pay her. Just wait until you hear how I dismantled her entire empire. Steam from what used to be a luxury hot tub rises into the lake mist, turning the scene into something out of a disaster film. But this isn't disaster, it's justice. I'm Dylan Freeman, and 3 hours ago, I ran my excavator through the priciest illegal structure ever dumped on Freeman family land. The woman behind it, Lauren Clark, now stands in the wreckage, waving legal papers while her shoes cost more than my truck payment. She thought she could steal my inheritance while I slept. She was wrong, dead wrong. Italian marble countertops now lie shattered among lake stones my grandfather once collected. Gold fixtures that once sparkled like beacons now twist in muddy water. Each swing of that excavator bucket was therapy after months of her harassment. Tank Johnson hops down from the cab, brushing dust off his deputy uniform with hands equally trained in combat and construction. My brother in arms since Afghanistan, he's the only cop I trust to face Lauren's war on my family's rights. Demo complete, brother, he says, tossing me the keys. Property secured. My wife, Helen, steps from behind our truck, camera in hand, recording everything with the precision honed through 2 decades of investigative journalism. So much for peace and quiet. Dylan, she calls, eyes still on the viewfinder. Make sure you get Lauren's face when she learns the feds have been watching. Feds? That's news to me, but Helen's instincts never miss. Since I first discovered this illegal paradise 3 months ago, she's been uncovering layers of corruption I'm only just catching up to. Now Lauren, heels sinking into mud, tries to mask panic with corporate warmth. Mr. Freeman, she drones, this destruction of approved community infrastructure will have serious legal consequences. Approved community infrastructure on my private land. The audacity borders on insanity. Her legal papers are soaked by splashes from the wrecked hot tub, soon to be the priciest paper airplanes in county history. She demands $2 million for a $250,000 monstrosity built on land my family's held since 1947. Her math is as crooked as her scheme. Neighbors gather like it's a festival, folding chairs lining the shore, kids running lemonade stands with signs reading, "Justice tastes sweet," and Freeman family freedom. Even American entrepreneurship sides with me. Lauren's Tesla is bogged down in the muck, forcing her to watch her paradise crumble into gravel. Her spotless outfit stains with each frantic gesture, maybe the first time money can't buy her a fix. The symbolism is perfect as Tank scrapes away her imported beach, revealing the natural shoreline my grandfather restored in the 60s. Fake sand gives way to real stones older than Lauren's fortune. Real beauty doesn't need pretense, just like real ownership. Tank shuts down the machine and leans in. "Brother," he murmurs, "federal agents want a word. Your demolition kicked open an investigation they've been building for months. A property dispute? Too small a term for the rot Tank hints at." Helen lowers her camera with that satisfied grin I remember from her front page exposes. "Got it all," she says. Lauren's breakdown, the crowd's cheers, even the kids hawking lemonade. She's been preparing for this vindication since the first day we saw Lauren's palace rise like a mockery of law and inheritance. Lauren approaches with what remains of her legal team, still parroting corporate jargon. This destruction of community enhancement infrastructure marks a dangerous escalation, requiring comprehensive legal response, she declares. Community enhancement? She calls a stolen vacation palace community service. The crowd includes Elena Stone from next door, her look betraying a history with Lauren's tactics. She wants to speak, but fear seals her lips. That silence alone shows how deep Lauren's influence runs. Then Tank's radio crackles, his posture stiffens, his eyes sharpen. Something bigger is unfolding, brother, Tank says after a quick exchange with dispatch. The federal task force wants to coordinate with local law enforcement about evidence preservation and witness protection. Evidence preservation. Witness protection. Suddenly, we've gone from a property fight to a federal criminal case, and no one bothered to tell me we were playing at that level. Lauren's confidence is cracking now because she knows federal eyes mean her county connections can't shield her the way she's counted on. The woman who tried to steal my inheritance through zoning tricks and environmental fraud is learning that some crimes catch the attention of agencies far beyond her influence. Helen's already on her phone, reaching contacts. I didn't know she had journalists who follow federal cases tied to organized crime and corruption. Dylan, she says while juggling calls, what happened to us might be just one piece of something much bigger than HOA overreach. Bigger. The word pounds in my head as I realize our fight for land may have uncovered a criminal network reaching past county lines. Meanwhile, our neighbors are turning the demolition into a celebration. Flags wave, kids hand out lemonade, and folding chairs line the lake like it's the 4th of July. The rubble has become a rallying point for property rights and constitutional values. But Lauren's face tells another story. She knows federal heat complicates everything. Her so-called empire wasn't just local bullying. It was part of a larger machine. Tank's update makes it clear. Investigators who specialize in organized schemes targeting rural areas are now involved. Lauren's operation wasn't just bold. It was strategic, dangerous, and deeper than any of us imagined. Still, one question sticks in my mind. How did she know I'd be at that exact fishing spot at dawn? Someone had been watching me. 2 months earlier, my life was simpler. My biggest concern was whether to use oak or maple for a custom dining table. Every Tuesday for 20 years started the same. Coffee at 5, check the forecast, and hike out to inspect the remote edges of our 47-acre spread. The northern shoreline always needed extra eyes. It's rugged, easy for trespassers to slip into, and my grandfather drilled into my father, who drilled into me, that a man should know every inch of his land. The walk through the oak grove takes half an hour along deer trails older than our family ownership. Usually, it's my weekly piece. Helen calls it my meditation walk because I return calmer, ready to tackle work in the shop. But that morning felt wrong before I even saw anything. The birds were quiet, and a chemical smell clung to the air. When I rounded a bend and spotted that gleaming monstrosity squatting on my shoreline, my first thought was I'd wandered onto the wrong property. But my GPS told the truth. I was 200 yards inside our line, standing where my dad used to take me camping. The oak tree where we carved our initials in '85 now sat inside someone's manicured landscaping. The site was an insult to everything natural. Gold-plated fixtures caught the sunrise like a beacon. An artificial beach of imported sand, probably worth more per pound than gold, stretched across my family's shoreline. A hot tub perfectly angled for the best view of water we've protected for 3 generations. This wasn't construction. It was colonization, and then came the gut punch. As I stepped closer, motion sensors triggered a cheerful voice. Welcome to paradise. Enjoy your lakefront experience. On my own land, my own inheritance. Technology mocking me like I was a guest at my own lake. For a second, I thought it had to be some twisted reality show prank. Nobody actually builds a palace on stolen property and programs it to greet the rightful owner like a tourist. Then my phone rang. Tank's voice carried that careful tone cops use when they know that News isn't good. Brother, got a call about a construction disturbance on your property. Everything good out there? Good? I was staring at a structure worth more than I'd make in 5 years, rising from the land where my grandfather taught me to fish. Anne? Hour later, Helen arrived with gear I didn't even remember she had. A drone. A professional-grade camera. Legal pads full of shorthand that looked like encrypted code. My wife never throws away tools of the trade, and right then, I was grateful. Dylan, she said as the drone lifted, normal rich people don't drop a $250,000 structure on someone else's land without a bigger plan. This isn't spoiled behavior. It's calculated. Her footage exposed layers of insult marble I couldn't pronounce the origin of. Exotic hardwoods worth more than my shop's monthly income, a full smart home system managing lights, temperature, and security for a house that didn't legally exist. This wasn't theft. It was a show of power, a taunt meant to remind me how much money she could throw at violating my rights. Then Helen spotted it. A bronze plaque by the door reading Willow Lake HOA, a community enhancement project with Lauren Clark's name etched. As coordinator, this wasn't random. It was deliberate and HOA, a land grab dressed up as community improvement. My family's land has never belonged to an HOA, and it never will. Lauren's arrival 30 minutes later confirmed it all. This wasn't a mistake, not a surveying error. It was a calculated move, backed by legal prep and months of planning. She rolled up in a Tesla worth more than my yearly income, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and carrying a briefcase that screamed international corporate deal-making. Mr. Freeman, she began, her voice dripping with that fake warmth executives use before dropping bad news. I believe we need to discuss community development protocols and shared resource optimization. Community development protocols on private property my family's owned since 1947. She spoke of easements, zoning, and environmental access, like she was reading from a law school lecture, not standing on land my grandfather bought with sawmill wages. Her confidence was polished and absolute, the kind that comes from practicing shady property takeovers. Before the document she pulled from that overpriced briefcase looked official enough to fool anyone unfamiliar with municipal paperwork. Surveys, environmental assessments, permits, the kind of things that take months to secure legally. But Helen spotted the flaws instantly. Her years in investigative journalism had trained her to recognize forged government documents masquerading as the real deal. "Ma'am," I said, gripping the papers that felt wrong in ways I couldn't yet explain. "This is private property. It's been ours since 1947. Your cabin is illegal, and I want it gone immediately." Lauren's smile never faltered. She just launched into a pitch about community enhancement and shared development as if giving a boardroom presentation, instead of committing criminal trespass. For 20 minutes, she paraded jargon and corporate doublespeak while I grew more furious, standing on the very land where my father once taught me what American property rights meant. Tank's arrival broke the tension before I snapped. From the neighboring property, Helena Stone watched, her face betraying recognition. She looked like someone who had seen Lauren's tactics before, but fear of consequences kept her silent. Her hesitation said everything. Lauren's reach and ability to retaliate were already common knowledge in this community. The fake paradise she built wasn't just arrogance, it was a calculated violation, perfect in its luxury and absolute in its disrespect. But I wouldn't understand how deep this went until later. Then came the next violation, more personal than construction and far more sinister. Somehow, Lauren had a duplicate key to my workshop, and she'd been inside. I didn't discover it from hidden microphones, but through something worse, my own security cameras. They'd been hacked, feeding live footage straight into her surveillance network. Tank's law enforcement contacts confirmed the truth. whoever did this had serious technical skills. My cameras still looked normal, recording as usual, while secretly broadcasting every move I made. She and her team had been watching me work, listening to conversations with Helen, and mapping my routines for weeks, maybe months. Brother, Tank told me while his tech contact dissected the breach. This is federal-level hacking, not local HOA nonsense. A professional surveillance op. Helen kicked into full investigative mode. Her digging revealed that property owners across the region had suffered identical hacks, followed by sudden legal troubles tied to environmental or zoning disputes. Dylan, she said while cataloging the evidence, Lauren's group has been spying on rural landowners for years. We're not her first targets. But instead of folding under the weight of being monitored in my own home, I chose to flip it on her. Military training teaches you. Enemy intelligence can be turned into opportunity. And Lauren's surveillance had one fatal flaw, they thought. I was too dumb to notice. Time to prove them wrong. Helen and I built a counter-surveillance plan. Stage fake conversations within range of the compromised cameras, mention hidden documents in false locations, and strategize legal defenses that didn't exist. If Lauren wanted to spy, we'd feed her fiction and study her reactions in real time. Tank's role got complicated when his department started getting calls questioning his inappropriate involvement in my case. That told us Lauren had pull inside the sheriff's office too. Brother, he said one evening, frustrated, someone high up is leaning on me. They want me off this case completely, which means they're planning something big and they need law enforcement to stay out of the way. Word about the surveillance spread fast and split the community down the middle. Businesses tied to HOA money turned cold toward my family, while old neighbors loyal to my father began organizing informal networks of support. Even the local coffee shop had an invisible dividing line, those who bought Lauren's lies and those who stood by. Property rights. That's when Elena finally approached us. A secret diner meeting, 2 towns away. She leaned in close, voice low. Mr. Freeman, she said, I worked as Lauren's secretary for 5 years until she fired me for asking about financial irregularities. I know exactly how her organization operates. And I've been saving evidence because I knew someday someone would be brave enough to fight back. She arrived in a Tesla that probably cost more than my yearly income, dressed in clothes worth more than my monthly mortgage, carrying a briefcase that looked built for international boardrooms. Mr. Freeman, she began with that carefully. Practiced warmth corporate executives use when they're about to deliver bad news. We need to discuss community development protocols and shared resource optimization. Community development protocols on land my family had owned since 1947. She rattled off terms like easements, municipal zones, and environmental rights as though she were reciting from a legal manual, not standing on ground my grandfather bought, with sawmill wages. Her confidence was absolute, polished, the kind of confidence that comes from repeating the same scheme countless times. The documents she pulled from her expensive briefcase looked legitimate enough to convince anyone who hadn't spent years spotting fraud indicators in government paperwork. Property surveys, environmental reports, and permits, things that usually take months to produce through real legal channels. But Helen's journalism background spotted irregularities immediately, signs of professional forgery, not authentic. Municipal approval. Ma'am, I told her, holding papers that felt wrong in ways I couldn't yet explain, this is private property. It's been in my family since 1947. Your cabin is illegal, and I want it removed immediately. Lauren's smile never cracked. She kept talking about community enhancement and shared initiatives, pitching it like a boardroom presentation while standing on stolen land. For 20 minutes she remained calm, professional. and rehearsed while I grew angrier, thinking about the lessons my father taught me about property rights and the Constitution. Tank's arrival cut off what was turning into a heated standoff. From the neighboring property, Elena Stone watched, her expression carrying the weight of recognition, as if she'd seen Lauren use these tactics before. She looked like she wanted to intervene but knew the cost of crossing someone like Lauren. That hesitation told me everything Lauren's influence and capacity for retaliation were already known in the community. The artificial paradise Lauren had constructed on my shoreline represented more than entitlement. It was a blueprint for something bigger, something darker. At the time, I didn't fully understand. Her construction was flawless and luxury and absolute in its violation of every property right my family had defended for 3 generations. But one question haunted me. Why did Lauren have a duplicate key to my workshop? And what else had she been inside? The next violation answered that in a way far more disturbing than trespassing. I didn't find bugs or hidden microphones. What I discovered was worse. My security cameras had been hacked, feeding live video directly to her surveillance network. Tank's contacts confirmed the breach had been executed by someone with high-level technical skills. The system was sophisticated enough to record everything while showing me normal feeds, which meant Lauren's people had been watching me work, listening to private conversations with Helen, and profiling my daily life for weeks, maybe months. Tank's friend, a computer specialist, explained bluntly, "Whoever did this has federal-level skills. This isn't local HOA corruption. This is a professional surveillance op." Helen's investigative instincts kicked in. She dug deeper, uncovering reports of identical hacks across the region. Property owners who had their cameras compromised often found themselves facing sudden environmental violations or property disputes. "Dylan," she said, documenting every scrap of evidence, "Lauren's group has been running surveillance ops like this for years. We're not their first targets." But instead of despair, I saw opportunity. Military training had taught me that when the enemy gathers intelligence, it opens doors for counterintelligence. Lauren's arrogance was her weakness, she assumed. I was too naive to notice that, so Helen and I staged conversations about false hiding places, fake legal strategies, and fictional timelines, all carefully within range of our compromised cameras. If Lauren wanted to spy, we'd make sure she wasted her time watching shadows. Meanwhile, Tank faced growing pressure inside his department. Complaints about his unprofessional involvement were clearly engineered, and his career was being weaponized against him. "Brother," he warned me, "someone with political pull is making calls. They want me out. That means they're planning something that requires law enforcement cooperation." The community's response split down the middle. Businesses tied to HOA patronage began distancing themselves, while longtime neighbors quietly built support networks around us. Even at the local coffee shop, invisible lines formed between those who trusted Lauren's story and those who knew property theft. When they saw it, then Elena approached us directly, arranging a secret meeting 2 towns over. "Mr. Freeman," she whispered. "I worked as Lauren's secretary for 5 years before she fired me for questioning financial irregularities. I know exactly how she operates. I've kept evidence, waiting for someone brave enough to fight back." Her files painted a picture worse than we imagined. Lauren's scheme wasn't just trespassing, it was a coordinated operation backed by county officials, paid to fast-track permits and ignore boundary violations. Inspectors, zoning officers, supervisors, all compromised. "She doesn't just steal land," Elena said flatly. "She's corrupted the system that's supposed to protect you." Elena's notes detailed Lauren's contracts with a private security firm specializing in corporate espionage. Families were profiled for months, financial histories, relationships. vulnerabilities until the right pressure points were found. Even worse, Lauren ran psychological profiles, identifying ways to isolate targets from their communities. Military veterans like you, Elena explained, are profiled because she counts on your training making you react aggressively. Then she uses law enforcement to justify removing you. Tank's federal contacts confirmed Elena's evidence pointed to interstate and possibly international funding. Brother, he told me grimly, this isn't just local corruption. It's systematic property seizure across multiple states. The psychological warfare was relentless. Helen's freelance clients began receiving anonymous warnings about her reputation. My furniture orders were suddenly canceled, whispers spreading that I was unstable. 2 decades of honest work undone overnight by invisible hands, pulling strings, but our counterintelligence trap was working, feeding Lauren's. Team false data forced them to waste time chasing ghosts. Meanwhile, Helen's documentation grew into a mountain of evidence, an archive proving Lauren's network was waging economic warfare against American families. Dylan. Helen said one night, sorting files into overflowing cabinets, "This isn't just property theft. This is federal conspiracy." Tank, now under immense pressure, visited with a warning. "The feds are circling, but local politics may force my hand first. They want you charged. This woman is using government systems to criminalize resistance." Elena's files confirm the pattern. Families who fought back either lost everything in court or were destroyed by criminal charges. Lauren had perfected a machine for legalized theft, and just when I thought I had her on the defensive, the betrayal hit closer than ever my own bank. 3 weeks after uncovering the surveillance, I received a letter that shook me harder than anything since Afghanistan. The Freeman family account, clean for 30 years, was under review for suspicious activity tied to money laundering and environmental crime financing. Words that had nothing to do with custom furniture. Helen found me staring at the letter. At dawn, reading over my shoulder, her face hardened. "Dylan," she said, "banks don't open investigations like this unless someone powerful is feeding them very specific allegations." We both knew who that someone was. The psychological blow was crushing. 20 years of spotless credit and honest work erased by one woman's influence. The letter even recommended legal counsel for potential federal investigation, like I was a cartel boss, not a carpenter. That evening, Tank arrived for an unofficial sweep of the house. "Brother," he whispered while checking corners, "word in the department is that federal investigators are being fed a story about your business and environmental compliance. Someone's creating a paper trail to bury you." The financial pressure kept climbing when my business insurance was suddenly canceled without any explanation. Not long after, 3 major custom furniture orders were withdrawn, clients citing concerns about my stability during these so-called ongoing investigations. Everything Elena had warned us about Lauren's systematic destruction of families was playing out with brutal accuracy. And it made me understand why so many victims before us simply surrendered their land rather than endure this kind of economic warfare. But the blow that broke something deep inside me wasn't financial, it was personal. Tank uncovered evidence that Lauren's network had bribed hospital employees to gain access to my father's confidential medical records from his final months. Records they twisted to frame his fatal heart attack brought on by stress from fighting these same people years ago as evidence of inherited instability and violent tendencies in me. Helen's investigation confirmed it. Lauren's people had been compiling a detailed dossier on my family for years: financials, health files, work history, even psychological assessments, all designed to justify criminal charges the moment we resisted her theft. "Dylan," Helen whispered, flipping through documents that froze my blood. "They've been planning to destroy us since long before they built that cabin. That was just the trigger. Elena became even more vital then. She revealed that Lauren's group maintained files like ours on dozens of families, each one mapped out with vulnerabilities, each one targeted for eventual takeover. I typed these reports myself for 5 years, Elena admitted during another hidden meeting. Your file was one of the thickest I ever saw. They've been studying you like a military target. The community shift was impossible to miss. Neighbors who once knew my family avoided eye contact at the grocery store. Shops turned us away. Even our church got anonymous complaints about environmental criminals sitting in their pews. The smear campaign was precise, coordinated, and devastating. Tank's career took its own hit. Complaints about his involvement with me, the supposed subject of a federal investigation, forced him to back away, though he still slipped me warnings. When he could, "Brother," he told me one night, "someone high up is building a criminal case against you. If it moves forward, local politics won't protect either of us." The weight of it all pressed harder than anything I'd faced since Afghanistan. Helen was burning out, carrying exhaustion I couldn't fix, while our marriage was strained by a campaign designed to fracture families. Worse, they were listening, monitoring our private conversations, looking for cracks to exploit. Elena's files revealed the brutal truth. Lauren had never lost. Over 15 years, 7 families had fought, and every one of them was destroyed, bankrupt, criminalized, or forced to sell. "She's perfected this system," Elena said, "but she's never gone up against someone with your training." Helen's contacts across state lines added another layer. This wasn't local corruption anymore. It was national, maybe international. "Dylan," she said while coordinating with investigative reporters, "what's happening to us is part of a much larger assault on rural property rights." Then came the crushing hit. Our mortgage company got anonymous reports of environmental violations, triggering a forced property inspection. 30 years of payments, and suddenly foreclosure loomed, all because someone labeled our land a contamination risk. Tank delivered the only sliver of hope. "Brother," he said quietly in the hardware store, "federal eyes are on this. But they move slow. The local courts? They'll move fast. Time isn't on your side." Elena's warning proved right when environmental investigators showed up unannounced with search warrants, hauling equipment to test our soil and water for contamination that didn't exist. But the way they worked told a darker story. They weren't searching randomly. They went straight to specific locations, like they already knew where evidence should be. Someone had fed them a script. Elena explained exactly how. Lauren's group had perfected the art of bending environmental law into a weapon. Meanwhile, Helen's meticulous documentation had grown into filing cabinets full of proof of conspiracy federal crimes dressed up as community development. "Dylan," she said one night, slamming a drawer shut, "we're documenting a criminal enterprise. But unless federal law enforcement acts soon, the local courts are going to bury us alive." The truth was clear. This wasn't about one mansion or one land dispute. This was psychological warfare designed to break us, financially, emotionally, and socially, until surrender was the only option left. Military training teaches you how to manage stress, but nothing in civilian life prepares a family for the kind of systematic assault carried out by criminals with government connections. Elena's final warning was blunt. The environmental investigation would soon escalate into criminal prosecution, followed by property seizure and federal auction to Lauren's development partners. "She's accelerating the schedule because your resistance is lasting longer than usual," Elena explained. "That means either her funders are pushing harder, or she's preparing for something bigger than just stealing land." That night Tank arrived with a knock that wasn't casual. 3 sharp raps, 2 softer, our old Afghanistan signal for urgent contact without drawing attention. When I opened the workshop door, He wasn't in his county deputy uniform. He wore a federal task force jacket and carried paperwork that looked nothing like local warrants. "Brother," he said, stepping inside, closing the door, "everything you think you know is about to change." He spread the arrest warrants across my workbench. Not one name, but three. Lauren Clark, of course. Michael Clark, her husband, almost invisible during all this. And Richard Patterson, the county environmental coordinator who'd been fast-tracking Lauren's fake permits and staged investigations. The FBI's been building a case for 18 months. Tank told me, and the relief in his voice made it clear he'd carried this secret far too long. "Your property fight didn't start federal attention, it ended it. You gave them the last piece of evidence they needed for a criminal enterprise, spanning 6 states, with international money laundering tied to environmental fraud, international money laundering, racketeering, environmental fraud across multiple states. Overnight, what I thought was a property dispute had turned into organized crime prosecution. I realized I'd been gathering evidence all along, not just defending my family's land." Tank explained how his quiet inquiries into Lauren's background had triggered alerts to federal investigators who'd been tracking her since 2018. List of charges was staggering: racketeering, bribery of state and federal officials, offshore tax evasion, money laundering through fake environmental remediation firms, and what prosecutors now called economic terrorism systematic attacks on American property owners. Helen's role also came to light. Tank revealed that her investigative skills and journalism background had attracted the FBI weeks earlier. They'd recruited her to help map Lauren's theft patterns. She hadn't told me, but I understood why. Her digging from 20 years ago had already put her on their radar. Then came the real twist. Michael Clark, Lauren's own husband, had been secretly cooperating, recording her conversations and copying financial records for months. 20 years married to a criminal empire, and he finally decided saving himself mattered more. Lauren's paranoia, her sudden ramp-up in surveillance, her erratic aggression, it all made sense now. Federal surveillance had been operating in the shadows the whole time, layered over Lauren's own harassment. "Some of the bugs you found were hers," Tank said, showing me photos of agents monitoring the property. "But others? They were ours. You've been living inside a federal sting without even realizing it." Elena's defection sealed the case. Her years of typing reports for Lauren provided prosecutors with the inside proof they needed. "I always knew she was stealing property," Elena admitted to federal agents, "but I didn't see the international laundering until the offshore accounts and cartel connections surfaced." Even the HOA secretary, the one fired for asking questions, was now a witness linking Lauren's fraud to global networks. The raid was set for the next morning, perfectly timed. Federal agents would arrest Lauren live on television during her interview about unstable property owners. Tank's grin said everything. "Brother, she's about to be cuffed for international conspiracy while preaching about community safety." Helen's media contacts coordinated with federal press officers to ensure the arrest hit national headlines, framed as part of a broader war on global property theft. "Dylan," she told me, showing her messages with investigators, "what's happening to us is happening everywhere in rural America. They want the public to see the scope of it." The community's reaction was shock, then shame. Overnight, the coffee shop whispers stopped. Neighbors who once parroted Lauren's lies now mumbled apologies, embarrassed they'd supported a global criminal conspiracy against their own town. Small-town politics awkward, but human. Tank's role shifted. Permanently, too. He was now embedded in the federal task force, moving from county politics to national security work. "Brother," he said while reviewing files from 12 other states, "Lauren's crew is just one piece. This is systematic economic warfare, and they need people who understand how it targets rural America. The international stakes became clear when Tank laid out what federal investigators had uncovered: offshore funding pipelines, coordination with foreign development cartels, and money laundering schemes worth hundreds of millions. This wasn't just fraud. It was research and testing for property seizure methods designed to be rolled out across rural America, backed by psychological warfare campaigns meant to dismantle entire communities that resisted. For Elena, the shift from silenced HOA secretary to federal witness wasn't just personal redemption. It symbolized the voices of countless victims who'd been waiting for someone to stand up. I documented everything because I knew one day someone would fight back, she told investigators. I wanted to make sure they had the proof to bring down the whole conspiracy. Federal asset seizure against Lauren's empire was swift and crushing. Agents confiscated her offices, vehicles, bank accounts, real estate, and every luxury she had piled up over years of fraud. The woman who had tried to steal my property was still wired with a TV microphone, smiling through a scripted interview when federal agents began hauling boxes of evidence out of her headquarters. But the case also explained why Lauren had been so confident, so methodical. International organizations document everything, Tank told me as we combed through intelligence reports. They use the files to train partners in new regions. Lauren's confidence came from believing she was untouchable because of those ties. Michael's cooperation made the picture even darker. His records proved Lauren wasn't just flipping land, she was running field tests for international groups bent on eliminating American property rights in key rural regions. She wasn't stealing for profit, Michael admitted. She was running research and development for foreign forces who want control of American land. Federal protection for our family was immediate. Security details, victim services, legal support. Prosecutors promised that Lauren's network was dismantled and her global ties were under active investigation by national security divisions. At the same time, Helen's book proposal detailing our ordeal drew interest from agencies eager to use it as a training guide for rural communities facing similar threats. Dylan, she said while drafting with federal media specialists, our nightmare is going to help protect other families from this kind of warfare. But there was still one piece missing: the offshore accounts. The FBI had Lauren's files, yet every time those accounts were mentioned, Michael looked like he'd seen a ghost. 3 days after Lauren's arrest, he showed up at my workshop door. He looked wrecked, hair unkempt, clothes borrowed from a hotel gift shop, driving a rental car, gripping a briefcase like it contained nuclear codes. "Mr. Freeman," he whispered, scanning the shadows of my lumber racks. "You need to know why I'm more afraid of those offshore accounts than I am of federal prison." Inside the briefcase was a flash drive with 2 decades of records, far more complete than anything the FBI had gathered. It contained financial ledgers tracking Lauren's laundering operation from the beginning, recorded conversations with foreign cartels, and correspondence spelling out a chilling strategy: systematic economic warfare against American property owners. "I didn't just collect this for divorce court," Michael confessed. "I kept it because I realized Lauren was part of something that threatened national security." One encrypted folder labeled Project Lakefront explained why. He looked sick whenever offshore funding came up in court. It contained maps of major lake systems across 12 states, psychological profiles of property owners most likely to resist, financial projections treating U.S. land as a commodity for foreign investors, and operational timelines showing that Lauren's campaign was only the prototype. Michael revealed that his cooperation had actually begun years earlier, triggered when he discovered Lauren's environmental contracts were being underwritten by international cartels. She wasn't building a business, he told me. She was a test pilot for foreign forces that view rural American land as a strategic resource, something to seize by corrupting our own legal systems. His account also revealed how these networks recruit domestic partners. 2 decades ago, Lauren had been just an ambitious developer. Early correspondence showed the slow creep of foreign money, first small, then larger, always tied to conditions that pulled her deeper into a role she could never back out of. Helen's investigative eye was vital in interpreting the scope of Michael's files. "Dylan," she said, flipping through projections that mirrored operations in other states, "this isn't about your land. It's about dismantling American property ownership, one rural community at a time." Tank's assignment with the federal task force added even more weight. "Brother," he said, pointing to documentation of parallel schemes in multiple states, "what Lauren's group tested on your family is already being scaled nationwide. Michael's evidence is the key to stopping it before more communities are destroyed." The personal cost of Michael's cooperation became brutally clear as he revealed the toll of living beside someone orchestrating economic warfare against his own country while pretending to be a model spouse and community leader. "I spent 5 years documenting crimes while sharing a bed with a woman systematically destroying American families," Michael admitted. "And the guilt of enabling her operations is something I'll carry forever." Elena's role in unraveling Lauren's scheme grew even more significant when Michael disclosed that her insider knowledge had been pivotal in showing how international criminal enterprises recruit and control domestic operatives to target American neighborhoods. Elena understood the scope of Lauren's operation before federal investigators did, Michael explained. Her testimony laid the groundwork for exposing how foreign entities twist local government systems to strip Americans of their property. The investigation was no longer confined to Lauren's organization. Michael's trove of evidence revealed coordinated networks spanning multiple states' domestic criminal groups, working hand in hand with international development cartels. The same offshore money trails kept surfacing, funding identical property seizure strategies meant to crush any American who resisted. His testimony gave prosecutors unprecedented insight into how global financiers were manipulating environmental laws and local governance as weapons of economic war. Lauren's offshore accounts were just one piece of a much larger machine. "But what terrified me most wasn't her laundering," Michael confessed to federal agents. "It was my own role. I helped create the very financial pipelines that are being used to fund property seizures across rural America. And the government still doesn't grasp how deep it runs." The revelation hit harder than anything yet uncovered. Michael hadn't merely documented Lauren's corruption. He had engineered the offshore financing networks fueling it. His betrayal of Lauren was not born of patriotism or morality, but self-preservation through immunity agreements that shielded him from prosecution. Helen's meticulous digging confirmed that Michael's ties to international development money predated his marriage, suggesting the couple's so-called partnership was more intricate and deliberate than federal investigators first imagined. "Dylan," Helen said, tracing decades-old bank records, "Michael didn't just expose Lauren. He designed the very systems that made her crimes possible." Brother Tank's federal contacts validated that Michael's files were both authentic and invaluable for prosecuting global economic warfare, but they also confirmed his cooperation was fueled by deals struck to save himself. Meanwhile, Elena's expertise in HOA corruption and community division helped agents map how international syndicates exploit American law from the inside out. Together, their testimony reframed the crisis. This wasn't just an HOA dispute, but an assault against American property rights on a national scale. Prosecutors began using Michael's evidence as an educational weapon, arming rural communities with knowledge to detect and resist these silent invasions. Asset seizures against Lauren's network funneled resources toward victims and restoration. But Michael's revelations showed the cancer ran far deeper. Cartel-backed financing was bankrolling similar operations in state after state, each one aiming to fracture rural America and dismantle private ownership. Offshore accounts, shell companies, and development grants were being wielded like weapons, coordinated by foreign entities treating American farmland as a commodity to be harvested. Then came the flash drive. Michael slid it across the table, his face pale. 20 years of files, but one encrypted folder stood out: Project Lakefront. Federal prosecutor Patricia Hayes later called me into her office, her tone grave. She spread Michael's evidence across the table, mixed with documents I had never seen before. "Mr. Freeman," she said, "the Project Lakefront folder contains operational blueprints for wide-scale property seizures across rural America. But what gives us confidence is the independent evidence we've been gathering, evidence from national security channels you never knew existed." Patricia explained that the investigation had been sprawling, with multiple agencies quietly tracking offshore flows since 2016. "We were watching Lauren's organization," she admitted, "but we needed victims willing to stand and fight before we could strike." Helen's background in journalism suddenly became a federal asset. Working alongside prosecutors, she shaped a media strategy to expose these schemes and empower other families to report similar crimes. "Dylan," she told me, coordinating with federal information specialists, "our nightmare is becoming the template for educating rural America on how to resist economic warfare." As for Tank, his federal task force was already expanding its scope, realizing Lauren's fall was only the surface fracture of a far larger storm. Michael's evidence, Elena's testimony, and Helen's documentation were no longer just pieces of a legal case. They had become part of a national security battle against foreign cartels bent on claiming the heartland, acre by acre. Brother Tank, poring over federal intelligence reports, explained that what happened to my family wasn't an isolated act of harassment. It was a test run for strategies being deployed against rural communities across the nation. Federal prosecutors built an education program around the case, teaching property owners how to recognize and resist the psychological warfare and legal manipulation techniques Lauren's organization had perfected. Town halls, legal workshops, and organizing sessions armed rural families with tools to defend their constitutional rights against the slow, calculated push of international economic colonization. Elena's unique insight into HOA corruption and community manipulation became vital, helping federal agents train local sheriffs and deputies to spot property theft operations before more American families were destroyed. I spent 5 years documenting Lauren's methods for dividing neighborhoods and isolating families. Elena told audiences at federal training conferences, "People need to understand that property rights are under systematic attack by foreign powers." Helen's growing victim network became a living archive of Lauren's crimes, a database stretching across state lines. Families stripped of homes by fraudulent environmental claims. Small contractors bankrupted by false accusations. Civil servants fired for rejecting bribes. Their testimonies exposed the web of coordination, proving Lauren's outfit was just one branch of a much wider criminal tree. Federal investigators soon confirmed that her operation was tied to at least 6 other states, all bankrolled by the same offshore cartels and all deploying identical blueprints for eliminating American property ownership in vulnerable rural regions. "What your family endured wasn't random," Prosecutor Patricia explained during trial prep. "It was systematic economic warfare by foreign entities aiming to control American land." Michael's testimony gave prosecutors an unprecedented window into how international cartels groom and deploy domestic criminals to wage that war. "I spent 20 years married to an international conspiracy," he admitted to federal agents. And I finally understood Lauren wasn't chasing profit. She was conducting warfare against her own country. The prosecution strategy shifted. Lauren's crimes would not be framed as petty property disputes, but as coordinated acts of economic aggression, weaponizing environmental law and local corruption against American citizens. Tank's military background proved invaluable, helping design training that taught rural deputies how to identify these operations before they could fracture communities. Lauren's group used military-grade psychological operations against civilians, Tank said while drafting protocols. They broke resistance the same way foreign enemies break populations. Meanwhile, Helen's book proposal began attracting attention from agencies eager to turn our nightmare into a tool for resilience. Federal officials saw the story as both warning and weapon proof that ordinary families could fight back with community, solidarity, and government support. Publishers sensed the public hunger for narratives of Americans defeating international conspiracies. Asset seizures from Lauren's empire not only funded compensation for victims, but also financed expanded investigations across the country, and even joint operations with allied nations facing similar threats. Helena's transformation, from silenced HO as secretary to federal consultants, stood as a symbol of victory over systemic oppression. Her expertise now helped train federal teams in law enforcement to spot organizations exploiting community trust and local systems to funnel land into foreign hands. The case's implications widened quickly, drawing in national security agencies charged with defending America's economic sovereignty. What began as a personal property dispute had become evidence of global warfare on U.S. soil. But Patricia's quiet confidence rested on something deeper, evidence I had never seen. Years of covert surveillance had tracked Lauren's communications and financial networks long before our ordeal brought it into the open. Federal eyes had been watching, waiting for a victim to fight back. Now, the case tied local property theft to a global criminal enterprise. As communities healed, the scars revealed just how deeply Lauren's psychological warfare had cut. Neighbors turned against neighbors, trust shattered. Yet the healing also proved how quickly rural America can unite when it sees the true threat. With federal protection, our family gained security details, legal backing, and ongoing briefings on remaining risks. Investigators warned us that Lauren's downfall was not the end. Similar operations were still active, powered by the same offshore money pipelines. The Phase 2 warning triggered federal mobilization. Patricia Hayes told me our case had become the cornerstone of a national defense strategy. Your family's ordeal gave investigators unprecedented insight into how international cartels operate, she explained. We're using that intelligence before others are targeted. Tank's task force began training local law enforcement in 12 states, exposing how cartels were already testing rural resistance for broader campaigns. Elena reminded communities that criminals succeed when families are isolated. So we built early warning systems, legal defense funds, and communication networks designed to keep communities united. Her testimony before Congress shook the nation. Foreign entities are waging systematic economic warfare against American landowners, she declared. Families need federal support and community coordination to defend constitutional rights. Legacy protection programs were created to guarantee that future freeman generations and countless others would inherit property legally validated and federally shielded. The dock my father built, once under siege, now serves as a classroom, where children learn the difference between ownership and stewardship. And yet, the timing of that email suggested something darker. These international networks weren't defeated, they were studying us. They were gathering intelligence, preparing Phase 2. Operations beyond anything local law enforcement or even federal task forces might be ready to handle. We had won battle, But the war for American property ownership had only just begun. The phrase Phase 1 complete carried a chilling implication. Everything we endured, Lauren's theft, the federal prosecution, even our community's hard-fought victory was nothing more than a trial run for a far larger and far more dangerous assault on American land ownership. Helen's investigation uncovered that other communities across rural America were receiving the same encrypted messages, each pointing to Phase 2 of a coordinated international campaign. Dylan, she told me as she worked alongside federal investigators, we didn't just stop one conspiracy, we were test subjects. They were studying how America fights back. The email from Lakefront Development International contained only one line, Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. What the hell had we just survived, and what comes next? That's my story for now. But it isn't over. If you want to see Part 2, where we uncover what Phase 2 really means and confront the next wave of this international conspiracy, hit that like button and comment Part 2 below. The more you engage, the sooner you'll hear how this war for our property rights continues. Thanks for staying with Listen Ho Stories through this journey. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay united, and keep fighting for what's yours.